What's up, everybody? It's your favorite sociologist and the identity professor, Dr. Aurelia Johnson, founder of The Own Project. I wanted to do this video because, number one, I want to say thank you for the positive, overwhelmingly positive response to the Gender is Not Sexuality video. And that kind of conversation always sparks discourse, conversation, debate, agreement, disagreement. More than anything else, what it sparks is curiosity. And so I want to do this video just very quickly, just about basic gender terms that that a lot of times we assume that we know, or that we may not know, that we need to know in order to get the language right. I think the acquisition of language is extremely important in these times, and we can't be afraid to say that we don't know, and we damn sure can't operate from places of guilt and shame, because there's just information that we're ignorant to, right? That we just haven't had access to, and so that's what this video is about. If you see here a fan in the background, that's my heater. I'm a little cold today. Actually, I'm cold every day. So, and this video ain't all cute and prettied up like the other ones, because the information just needs to speak for itself. So y'all bear with me. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is sex, right? Sex is biological. It's categorized and assigned at birth. It is an ascribed status. When I say ascribed status, I mean it is something that is given. It is not it's not earned. It is inherited, right? We inherit gender ideology. Whether we want, that's probably a whole nother conversation that we'll talk about later, but we inherit gender ideology. We inherit racial ideology. We inherit ideology, period. And so we have inherited gender ideology. We've been dealing with gender in a binary. And so we see gender as male, female, right? So biologically, you have XXXY, XXXY, right? And which either produces a penis and testicles and sperm, or it produces a vagina and a uterus and a cervix and ovaries and eggs. Or it produces physical genitalia where one may be more pronounced than the other, or both are present equally. It depends on how it shows up in the body. So biological sex is a thing that you're given at birth. Okay. Gender is not synonymous with sex. Okay. And that's Weston Zimmerman. So you can go and look at Weston Zimmerman, 1987. Gender is the cultural expression of femininity and masculinity. Gender is a performance. Gender is a social construct. Gender is macro. It's institutional. It is taught. It is learned. It is embedded within the society. It is an individual performance. It is the thing that we interact with when trying to label or identify people in either or kind of categories, even though now, and even anthropologically, historically, we have always been a very gender variant society. But legislation and policy and historical movements and progression has now got us in a place where we can talk about gender as a spectrum and not either or categories, if that makes sense. All right. So that's two things I want to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about is gender identity. Now, gender identity is the internal expression. It is the internal. It is identification. It is not always congruent with the external, if that makes sense. So The way the physical body shows up, what you see in the material world, may not be congruent or aligned with what the subjective existence is going on with the person. So inside I feel like this, outside I look like this, and they are not always aligned. For example, there are terms that we need to know, like cisgender, transgender, two-spirit, gender non-conforming, non-binary, agender. Now, when you're talking about gender identity, for me, I am a cisgender woman. What does that mean? Cis means born as, identify as. On my birth certificate, it says female. I identify as female. If you are a cisgender male, on the birth certificate, it says male. They identify as male, and their gender expression or gender identity is male, just like my gender identity is female, is woman. Okay? A transgender person is a individual whose gender identity is not congruent with their biological sex. A trans person can be born male, female, intersex, and live as something that is different than how their physical body shows up. So you can have a transgender male, right? Born as female, intersex, lives as male. You can have a transgender female, born as intersex or male, lives as female. You can have a trans person who's gender non-conforming, which they were born as male, female, or intersex, and then they have decided to not live in either of those categories, and now they are a non-conforming person. Here's a thing where it gets a little tricky about non-conformity. You can be a cisgender female or male and still be gender non-conforming, right? So gender non-conforming is a person that they don't conform to the prevailing notions about femininity and masculinity. They do gender and they perform gender how they want to, okay? A gender non-binary person does not exclusively identify as men or women. And these individuals' pronouns, you'll see they'll have pronoun descriptions, or they'll tell you their pronouns, and they'll say my pronoun is they, them, or zer. That's a gender non-binary person. Now, non-binary can show up in various ways. And a non-binary person can also consider themselves to be trans, right? Because trans, the word itself, means to turn, to change. So you can be a transgender non-binary person. An agender person goes completely without gender, right? They don't do male, female, masculine, feminine, boy, girl, man, woman. He, she, they don't do it at all. They are completely detached from any notion of gendering, period. And yeah, so I'm trying to make this, because I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. So when you're talking about gender identity, gender categories, right now we're really dealing with 5. Good thing about the Census Bureau is that they're actually getting ready to, I just did a training with them, and they are expanding the gender spectrum, and I'm very happy about that. But you have a cisgender person, which is cisgender male, cisgender female. You have a transgender person. You could be transgender male, transgender female. And then you have gender non-conforming people who can be transgender, or they can be cisgender. Gender non-conforming means you just don't do gender like society say you're supposed to do gender. A good example of a gender non-conforming person that is cisgender is Prince, Rick James, Boy George, Grace Jones. Gender non-conforming people. I don't do gender like you say I'm supposed to do gender. A gender non-binary person is people who do not identify exclusively as masculine, feminine, man, woman. Agender, throw gender away. I ain't doing it. I don't give a damn what you say. Okay. The other term that I wanted to talk about was two-spirit. I think this is probably one of my most favorite discoveries in gender is two-spirited person. Two-spirit is an indigenous term that's used to describe people who encompass masculine and feminine. Two-spirited people, you will usually see that identification in area when we're talking about in the United States. You will see that identification for a person that lives in places where there are large indigenous populations. So you'll see it in Utah, South Dakota, Oklahoma. You will see two-spirit, which I love. So it's two-spirit. What else can I say really quickly about gender terminology? Let me know in the comments if y'all have any questions. And if you actually would like to take my Gender 101 course. So I have one already ready to go. We go through all of the terms. We go through gender identity. We talk about it on the spectrum. I make a clear distinction between gender and sexuality. We talk about gender. We talk about the implicit biases that come along with gender. We talk about how do you ask for pronouns. There's different scenarios that we go through of how do you identify individuals. So let me know if you want to take the course. Of course, I'm always down to do that. And you know what I'm going to do? Because I know this question is going to come up. I'm going to do later on, I'll do a video and I'll post it about pronouns. Pronouns are important. And I know that people are not always, they're not always comfortable with asking pronouns. And we're not in a place where we're like comfortable with even a conversation about pronouns. Like you're kind of like, no, like in school it's he, she, that's it. What do you mean ask me your pronouns? What the hell does that mean? It's a new space where we have to identify people the way that they want to be identified, and this is not just a gender thing. We're going to have that conversation later too, but I'm trying to ease you in to this space of identity, because it's a very different space. It's a different space. It's been a different space for a long time, but because we've been socialized and we've been conditioned to see gender in these very limited ways, you know, now that we're in this space where people can show up and say, hey, this is who I am, deal with it or not. It challenges a lot of our ideas and ideologies, or the way that we have handled the world and the way the world has handled us. And so we have to get into a space now where we're having these kinds of conversations. So holla at me, DM me as always. Let me know if you have any questions. Comment below this video so we can have a really good dialogue about it. And I'll post I'll make sure that I post the pronoun video so you can have that as well. I'll holla at y'all later. Peace.